sort of, yeah, just getting started to think about what those outcomes of our session are. All right. And so in the time that we have together, so we've probably got almost 2 hours together today, give or take a couple of minutes here. And what we really want to make sure that we're doing is just setting the table. So, we've all been working on SSBCI across the country in different capacities, whether they were working on sort of Main Street focused areas, high growth focused areas, tribal nations, or even thinking about sort of suppliers, right? And so as we think about this work that we're trying to do together today, it's about really getting us all on the same page, right? And our agenda really reflects that piece about really getting us on the same page and sharing that sort of foundational knowledge that we hope to build on that allows us to sort of collaborate and partner successfully together. So 4 things on the agenda today. I think the first piece, I suspect some folks here have heard about IIE, have different understandings of what that work looks like. And so we'll spend a little bit of time, not too much, but a little bit of time talking about IIE, the initiative itself, and the scope of the work for the initiative. We'll also do a little bit of a dive into SSBCI, right? So we have our partners here from Nowak, who will be walking us through some of the foundational elements of SSBCI and really the scope of state engagement. Part of that conversation will also really involve, thinking about how the different types of SSBCI programs might actually relate to the work that you're doing, right? So again, we can just really close the loop and have a full picture here. Following that, we'll dive deeply into the knowledge network, right? So really, we're all here to think about collaboration, and that's really what the knowledge network is about. And so we'll be sharing a little bit more about the scope of the work of the knowledge network. And also, we're going to be thinking about sharing a demo of the knowledge network platform, right? So it's sort of the home of the knowledge network so that everyone knows where that resource is that we can go to for this collaboration and the communication across the states. I think finally we'll be in some breakout rooms here, and we're going to really along sort of vertical lines, so we're calling them verticals. Hopefully folks will get familiar with the language that we're using as we move forward. And, that could be high growth, tribal nations, that could be supplier, and then, of course, that could be Main Street as well. And folks will have a good amount of time to really work in those groups to start to think about how best to collaborate and move forward as we sort of get deeper into this IIE work. So lots of that fun to come over the next several hours. But before we do that, we do want to make sure that folks are getting to know each other a little bit more. And so right now, of course, in the chat, depending on when you came in, you'll see several sort of names and locations of where people are. But we do want to make sure that folks are talking a little bit, right? Because we'll start off with a few presentations, but want to make sure that folks get talking first. And so we'll start off with some introductions. And so in a moment, we are going to have some breakout groups. So those breakout groups, you should probably have about, 3 to 4 people in your breakout groups. And in those groups, we'd love you to just share your name, the organization you represent, of course, how your organization or entity is involved in the SSBCI programming, and then wrapping up with, what is one thing that you hope to get out of collaborating with other stakeholders working on SSBCI. All right, so that's the first thing we're going to start with. Before we open those groups, I just want to pause to just check in. Does anyone have any questions before we jump into those breakout groups? All right, Janine.
I do have a question, actually.
Sure.
Will we receive this deck that you're presenting now? I know we'll have the recording.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll share it right after the session, and of course, over the next several weeks, we'll be onboarding folks to the platform, and it will be present there as well. Thanks so much for the question, Janine. All right, awesome. So with that being said, I do believe it's time for some breakout groups.
Here comes everybody now.
Fair enough. Some of us have been waiting for seconds for you to join here. But awesome. So I see one note in the chat saying that was fun. So before we actually go back to the screen share, I know there were 3 questions in there. I know that everyone's name is up on the screen, and I know we dropped our organizations in earlier, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that anyone wants to share, and maybe around the 3rd question, right? So that piece around what's one thing you hope to get about collaborating with stakeholders working on SSBCI? And I'll take 1, maybe 2 volunteers to come off mute and just share.
everyone. My name is Jana Prashensky. I'm from Lendistry, and so I hope to learn more from other lenders and their experience in onboarding SSBCI programs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janet. At risk of a moment of silence here, I wonder if there's one more.
I'll jump in to alleviate that risk. So I'm Paul Jones, and I'm with Invest Detroit. And I'm really excited about hearing how different ecosystems and lenders are using and leveraging SSBCI funding for different alternative and integrated capital solutions. So I think this is a huge opportunity to do something a bit more creative and innovative. But I think it also takes learning and sharing best practices to do it the best way. So we're excited about hearing what's happening in different ecosystems.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate you saving me from that moment there. All right. Awesome. So maybe we'll get the screen share back up and we're going to transition here. So I'm going to pass over to our partners at Hyphen to really just walk through just an overview of IIE, really what the initiative is about. And then we'll transition on to really thinking a little bit more about SSBCI. So Felicia, I think I'll hand over to you here.
Sounds great, OC. So great to be with everybody today. I want to acknowledge my colleagues, Lee Zhao, who maybe you can wave, Lee, who's the VP of Strategic Partnerships at Hyphen, and Myung Hong Hurwitz, who's also on, if you can give a wave. So my name is Felicia Bartow, and I'm the VP of Strategic Initiatives at Hyphen. And we are really excited for today's first meeting of IIE's Knowledge Network. And our vision at the outset of this initiative was to hopefully to create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And the fact that you are all here today is evidence of that. So thank you for being here and taking time to join us. Just a little bit about Hyphen. We are a nonprofit intermediary, and we are providing overall coordination and serving as a central hub for IIE during its pilot phase, which runs through June of 2024. And Hyphen was really created with the idea that we want to help develop and support multi-sector public philanthropic partnerships that help advance racial equity and address some of the most urgent issues of our time. So IIE is, I think as hopefully most of you know by now, is a public-private collaboration to expand access to capital for small businesses owned by people of color, the fastest growing segment of the small business market. IIE was initially announced by Vice President Kamala Harris in January, in 2022, and launched officially in January 2023. And it's a national effort that seeks to ensure that Treasury's $10 billion SSBCI program strengthens the small business ecosystem and advances racial equity. Next slide, please. Actually, I think I'm one behind, so maybe one more ahead. Sorry about that. So IIE's overarching strategy or approach is to serve as a force multiplier to increase patient capital and spur the availability of innovative financial products that are tailored for entrepreneurs of color, with businesses of varying sizes at different stages of growth and in a range of industries and markets. And the idea is to tap into good work that's happening in different parts of this small business ecosystem, work that you all are doing and leading, hone in on specific areas where capacity building and coordination are most needed, particularly when it comes to leveraging SSBCI resources at the state and tribal level, and to amplify our collective efforts through the media and other communication channels. Next slide. So IIE is national in scope. We've identified some initial geographic priority areas for capacity building efforts, including the 9 states in orange on this map, plus at least one additional tribal nation, likely in the Southwest. And some of our partners are leading work in various other states, some of which are in blue, some of which are not highlighted, but just to emphasize that our knowledge network is intended to be a place where we can come together across the country, no matter where your location is, no matter what state you're in. If we can go to the next slide. So we're immensely grateful for our partners at Next Street, Founders First Capital Partners, Jumpstart, and Mission Driven Finance, which are helping to coordinate efforts within each of IIE's verticals, including Main Street businesses, suppliers, high growth, and tribal. Each of these areas has its own unique set of stakeholders, financing gaps, and perspectives on the field. So we're excited to hear from all of you and sort of how you see this landscape from your vantage point. I also want to acknowledge Nowak Metro Finance Lab, which you'll hear from shortly. They're leading a community of practice for state SSBCI administrators, which has been critical to this work. Next slide. So we're seeking to engage many stakeholders in this ecosystem, but above all, we want to keep small businesses owned by people of color front and center in our efforts. And I just want to emphasize, IIE is not an initiative of the Treasury Department itself, but there's enthusiastic support for our collective efforts from agency officials at the highest level, as well as the SSBCI team, and a real openness and willingness to engage in ongoing dialogue about opportunities and challenges, as well as points of friction within the SSBCI system and how we can reduce them together. So I just want to say in closing, we know that all of you have a lot of demands on your time. Each one of you brings a lot to the table in terms of your knowledge and your expertise. And we really invite you to help ensure that this space, this knowledge network, is a valuable forum for knowledge sharing and exchange. And at Hyphen, collaboration, openness, and adaptation are absolutely critical to move this important work forward. I want to say unequivocally, our door is always open. We invite you to reach out to us at any point in time if you have questions or feedback that you'd like to share. But we really, truly hope that you'll help us make the most of this opportunity to come together through IIE's Knowledge Network. And we're especially grateful to OC and Joelle and team for helping to set the stage for today's discussion and those to come in the future. So with that, OC, I will pass the proverbial mic back to you.
Awesome. So I'll pause here for a moment and just check in with folks if there are any questions, right, about the initiative or anything coming up for you as you just see that sort of initial overview.
Yeah, just Mark Herbert, Small Business Majority. Good to see everybody. Just a quick question on the state map, the difference between sort of the blue states and the orange states. Could you just maybe expand a little bit on how you're thinking about sort of supporting and engaging in those states?
Yeah. Hey, Mark. Good to see you. So, and I'll maybe actually, OC, I might invite you guys to jump in on this. So the orange states are the ones that we identified initially where there was real traction and interest from state SSBCI administrators to begin to dialogue about capacity building needs and what the ecosystem looks like. So, that was sort of our initial starting point since we couldn't start with every state. The blue states represent places where some of our partners are doing initial work that's informing our efforts. And of course, as I mentioned, we're going to be adding a tribal nation very soon. But, I think the point of this knowledge network is not to limit ourselves to work in these states. We want to lift up lessons, best practices, challenges, concerns that are occurring across the country, and to use this as a place where we can kind of, come to some idea of how we can address those challenges together. So OC, I'll let you share anything else you want to add from the Knowledge Network perspective. But, I think, we've certainly heard from folks in other states and, want to be responsive to their interests. But this is just sort of where we've dug the deepest with state administrators to date.
How's that landing for you, Mark?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Awesome, right? And I think, Felicia sort of alluded to this, but, part of what we're doing, especially through the Knowledge Network and the platform that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, is really trying to provide access across states, right? So, for example, tomorrow we're going to be meeting with Treasury and a couple of the different working groups that sort of have states that are outside of this scope, and really trying to onboard them to the platform as well, so that, again, it can be collaboration across the nation. I think part of our initial hope is to start here, right? We've dug deep here. We've had a couple of conversations with state administrators. I say a couple, quite a few conversations with state administrators across the way. But again, our view, our long-term view, is that, most of, if not all the states can eventually be onboarded to the platform to be part of this I guess, conversation. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Mark.
This is
Thanks,
Kevin
Felicia,
Taylor.
for sort of addressing that. Kevin?
Yeah, I'm in Colorado, and I know that's not orange and it's not blue. So what would that mean for me?
Yeah, so I think for you, right, as you're part of this right now, I mean, it certainly means that, you know, following this meeting, you'll be onboarded to the platform. And as you have conversations, which area are you most sort of focused on here? Is it a Main Street area?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's going to be a sort of a breakout room for the Main Street folks, and you'll learn a little bit more about, you know, what they've discovered, some of the lessons that they've learned in terms of a broader listening tour. And certainly following this meeting, you'll be onboarded to the platform where you'll minimally be able to be part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in because this question comes up quite a bit. You know, from our perspective, when standing up IIE, we had to start somewhere, and so we had to kind of get clear on the problem set, the areas of intervention. And so, you know, those are the states that we've spent the most time with, but we just did a convening in New York and invited a handful of states that aren't highlighted and are going to be, you know, working with them in the near term. So everything is you know, pretty fluid on our end.
Appreciate that, Chris. Right, and so Chris is partnering with the IIE from Jumpstart, right? So again, they're doing a lot of the high growth work across the country here as well. Awesome. All right. So I'll transition here. And so again, grounded in the IIE work now. And you know, of course, there's a couple of questions there. If there are more questions, you know, feel free to put them in the chat. And as we sort of close out today, we'll certainly hope to reply and respond to them, hopefully potentially on the platform as well once folks are onboarded. And so before we sort of talk more about that platform, I want to hand it over to our partners at Nowak Lab. And so Brian, I want to sort of invite you on here to share a little bit about SSBCI 2.0 and again, how that's relevant to some of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thanks, OC. Good afternoon, good morning, good whatever it is for you, Chris, in Japan. Late night, I think maybe. I'm Brian Fike. I'm a research officer at the Nowak Metro Finance Lab. Joined here with my colleague, Colleen Doherty. So Colleen, if you could wave or something on Zoom so everyone can see you. Pleasure to be with you all today. We are supporting the Knowledge Network portion of IIE. And so with that, just wanted to do a little bit of level setting on sort of what SSBCI is, how it's different from the last time around, where we see some opportunities. For many of you, this will be quite familiar. For others, it may be new, so we'll try to meet somewhere in the middle. So you can go on to the next slide, please. Just some of the basics on SSBCI, about a $10 billion program supporting a range of credit and equity programs, again, all targeted at small businesses, administered by states, territories, and tribal governments. It's a really federalized program. So administered nationally by Treasury, but those jurisdiction governments have a lot of sway and a lot of influence in terms of the programs they design and operate. The amounts allocated to jurisdictions were determined by formula. So there's a huge range there from as low as 57 million in some of the smaller states and territories, all the way up to $1.2 billion in California. Private capital is a critical piece of this program. That comes in the form of a one-to-one private to public capital match at the time a loan or investment happens, and a 10-to-1 private to public long-term leverage goal across programs and over the life of those programs. Technical assistance funds, originally those were 500 million. That got cut as part of the debt ceiling deal a few months back. For jurisdictions via the MBDA Capital Readiness Program, and just as of last week, there's a new opportunity open for jurisdictions as well. This go round of SSBCI, there's a special allocation for socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So SETI is the acronym you'll hear a lot in this program. That's $1.5 billion in a SETI allocation and $1 billion in SETI incentives for jurisdictions. There's also a $500 million allocation for very small businesses with fewer than 10 employees. And in general, we're talking about firms with 500 or fewer employees being eligible, with deals averaging around $5 million or less. Next slide, please. The SETI definition, I won't go through all of this now, but it's quite broad. One of the things that does is it enables jurisdictions to hit their SETI targets. One of the risks of that is that there are so many ways to reach SETI objectives that there's a risk of really bypassing Black and brown entrepreneurs, lots of categories who may be most disadvantaged and most in need of these kind of funds. These are characteristics either of the business owner or of the geography in which the business operates. Next slide, please. A few things that we were and we are excited about with SSBCI 2.0. With that federalist and fragmented approach, it allows for some room for innovation. We're excited to see different types of capital products, different capital delivery approaches to expand the reach of capital access to different firms, intermediaries, and end users. That SETI target and SETI incentive, we really hope will deepen reach into disadvantaged communities with SSBCI. The private capital match, we hope will bring in sort of new forms and greater volumes of private capital to support small businesses, kind of compared to where we were pre-SSBCI. We also hope that bolsters the capacity of local intermediaries to kind of build and sustain capital delivery capacity. That's just with the scale, with the eventual defederalization of these funds and new entities, new intermediaries coming on board. The other thing that we hope, and this is something that we saw in the notice of funding opportunity for technical assistance last week, potential real opportunities with this program for small and disadvantaged firms in emerging sectors. So think manufacturing, decarbonization, the like. Next slide, please. One of the deficiencies or flaws of the program is that we really don't have great real-time data on the program. So we're doing the best that we can with what we know. As of now, as of I think last week, Treasury put this out, 73 jurisdictions, so that includes states, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and some initial tribal governments, have received their first of 3 tranches of funds. About 700 million has been expended, allocated, or obligated. The implementation status really varies by jurisdiction. We've got some that are still sort of standing up their own internal capacity, getting ready to bring programs online. We learned last week that 3 states have received their second tranche out of the 3 total tranches, and we know that a handful of others are nearing that point. Technical assistance programs also rolling out at the jurisdiction level via the MBDA Capital Readiness Program, as well as that notice of funding opportunity that came out last week. Next slide, please. SSBCI will be delivered by via a handful of program types that Treasury has defined. Those range from credit support programs to equity programs. So those credit support programs are the first 4 here. I won't read through those in detail, all of which are basically meant to de-risk in some way private capital investment for small businesses. Equity programs generally supporting venture capital, high growth type firms. The alignment with the IIE verticals that you heard about earlier, this is mostly based off of SSBCI 1.0 data and a somewhat crude attempt to map some of the industry and sector data onto our IIE verticals. But in general, what we see is the Main Street supplier type businesses were most commonly supported by credit support programs, whereas high growth type businesses generally via equity programs. Next slide, please. Nationally, we've seen in the state and jurisdiction plans for SSBCI about a 60-40 split between credit and equity programs. Here's how this plays out for the initial IIE state cohort that Felicia mentioned earlier. Compared to the national average, this group skews a little bit more towards credit programs. So it's about 2/3 credit programs and 1/3 equity programs compared to about 60-40 nationally. And we see hugely different approaches here. You see some states are quite balanced in their credit and equity programs. Think Kansas, think New York, think Ohio. Others skew more towards debt. See California and Illinois at the top. Others skew much more towards equity programs. New Mexico, a good example of that one here. One of the things that we're excited about with this cohort is just the scale that we're talking about. So collectively, these jurisdictions are managing about $2.8 billion in SSBCI funds. Next slide, please. This is a point I've largely made already, but one of the things, one of the features of this program is it's kind of highly federalist, highly fragmented nature. It means there's lots of variability in the who, the what, and the how when it comes to delivering money from states and jurisdictions to firms. We're hopeful that that makes it an opportunity and a platform for innovation in capital products, in outside capital, in new forms of delivery. But that also comes with a challenge, right? We know that program compliance has been a high priority in many states and jurisdictions. The entities that are responsible for SSBCI are also the ones that are doing all of the other big federal programs that came out of the last Congress. And so capacity has been a challenge, I think, at the state and jurisdiction level. Next slide, please. And again, you see that front and center here. State level capacity has been one of the challenges that we've heard about. There's been some kind of rinse and repeat of SSBCI 1.0 here. While we want flexibility, we also know that states are sort of bound by contracts with their partners, with their contractors. Some administrative strings that are just inherent to federal programs and are very understandable, but that also creates some barriers to access. We've also heard a lot about some of the administrative fees that are allowed in the program and how that affects program economics in a way that may not be helpful. Some opportunities that we've seen come up as well: new intermediary networks, states and jurisdictions using this program to respond to the current interest rate environment and pullback in equity markets, and new types of entities coming online as well. I think that's all I've got. If you go to the next slide. And happy to take questions or anything that may have come up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brian. So yeah, we'll hold for a question or two if there are there, and then we'll transition to just, dive into a bit of the knowledge network portion of this, right? So yeah, what questions do folks have?
Hi, this is Kevin
Maybe
Taylor.
more of a comment. So Brian, thanks for sharing this. It's always helpful just to kind of see all of these moving parts consolidated in a way. Just coming off of like real-time conversations that I'm having in the field with emerging fund managers is just their overall kind of like navigation on Treasury's website and trying to find like answers to questions. And so like I'm looking at these slides and I'm like, wow, I wish I had those, because I kind of could have, shared some of this stuff as insights for them. So I'm just wondering if maybe you can connect the dots for me and the rest of the group, if we should anticipate kind of consolidated information like this going forward in the knowledge network that we would be able to repurpose or reuse in our verticals. And then just if you have any other kind of perspective or insight on how to best utilize Treasury's website, knowing that there's challenges in terms of going down rabbit holes to get to the information we're looking for.
Yeah, OC, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's really one of the goals of the Knowledge Network, is to just make some of this type of stuff available. So we're happy to make whatever we can available to kind of demystify the program, answer questions, make it a little bit more accessible than an 85-page PDF on the Treasury website. Yeah, I think they face the challenge of having to be kind of comprehensive and legalistic in a way that we don't have to. So when you really need the nuts and bolts, go to Treasury. If you just want some basics, we're kind of happy to help with stuff like that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and Teliandre, so this will be posted, and we're sort of in very deep partnership with Nowak here in terms of the Knowledge Network, and so all the different things that they're working on will also, as relevant, will be published on the Knowledge Network too. So once everyone gets access, these types of things will be there, and of course, if there are requests that folks have, you can certainly post that a comment in the platform, and we'll certainly see what we can do to sort of support that effort. Kevin, I think that you might have been about to come off, so I want to invite you in too.
Okay, thank you. I was noticing the type of organizations you were talking about. Is there funding or discussions about organizations that help to prepare the businesses to get funding? Because that's a role that we play. We provide education and training and financial training and literacy on those things, on how to be prepared to go out and get the funding, and then what you do when you get the actual funding itself. Is there anything in this that discusses that type of funding for those types of organizations?
Yeah, we didn't go into great detail on the technical assistance program with these slides, but one of the things in this program is the numbers change, but it was initially $500 million in technical assistance. So $200 million went out to jurisdictions. So again, that's states, territories, tribal governments. They're sort of designing their own programs. I think about a dozen of those have been announced so far. Others are pending approval by the Treasury Department. So typically the best place to look for that would be your state or jurisdiction website. There was $125 million via the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency. They announced those awards in August, so you can see where those funds are going. And then the opportunity that is not yet open, but will be open soon, is the remaining $75 million. That's coming directly from Treasury to jurisdictions. But jurisdictions are really encouraged to work with firms that provide legal, accounting, and financial advisory services to SETI-owned firms and to very small businesses, with a special emphasis on emerging sectors that have been supported by the big pieces of legislation from the last Congress. So think infrastructure, think manufacturing, think decarbonization. They just put out the guidance for that program last week. That's because it's pretty new. It's at the moment kind of at the top of the SSBCI webpage on Treasury's site.
All right. Is there someone that I have a contact at the MBDA, and what would I ask them about in terms of the programs to get them to kind of understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and maybe one of the follow-ups from this is we can just share a link out to all of the entities that received those MBDA funds, as well as what we know about the initial jurisdiction programs.
Okay, that would be outstanding.
Typically, those would be, maybe partnerships, things like that may be possible with those entities.
Absolutely, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Several of the gentlemen I already work with, so that might be something I can sit down and have that conversation with them about.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. So Kevin, I think one commitment we can have for you is to certainly sort of share that in our follow-up email from this session. So appreciate the question, Kevin.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll keep us rolling, right? And again, if there are other questions, I want to invite folks to put them into the chat. And I see we have a link to the Readiness Awards here. So thank you, Michael, right, for putting that in there. And again, we'll continue to post that once we finish the session as well. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the Knowledge Network, right? And so over the past sort of 45 or so minutes, we've already been having these conversations, right? So Teliandre talked about the importance of sharing digestible information, right? Which is something that we certainly want to make sure that we're doing. Kevin just talked about, hey, how do I make sure that I know about the technical assistance opportunities, right? So again, these are the types of conversations that we want to make sure that we're sort of having in this kind of space. And these are the types of conversations that we want to make sure we're hosting on the platform as well, right? And so we've heard about the purpose of the IIE. We've talked a little bit about SSBCI, the types of programs, the funding, the different opportunities that are coming up for technical assistance as well. And so as we turn to the Knowledge Network, right, again, we just want to emphasize that the importance of this is really around, bringing all the different groups working on SSBCI together, right? When we think about collaboration, we think about support, we think about advocacy, right, towards a more transparent ecosystem, right? So we have the ecosystem up here, and these are sort of a whole breadth of stakeholders who are involved in the IIE work. And so that goes from the implementation folks on the call here today, state administrators, tribal nations. And again, so it's really, really important to emphasize, right, this is the reach, the breadth of the program. And again, we want to make sure that as part of the Knowledge Network, our role is to keep everyone connected. I'll say that as we go to the next slide, our initial focus in terms of what we're trying to set up will be communities for these different groups, right? So all of the implementation partners, so Next Street, Jumpstart, Founders First, Mission Driven Finance, will certainly have communities that they're sort of managing, supporting, and so folks will be part of those communities that are working in those specific areas, right? To the point that Kevin made, right? So we'll have spaces for capacity building partners and other stakeholders, right, across these verticals. And so again, as I said, after this call, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be onboarding the folks who are here onto the platform. And then finally, of course, we're also going to be setting up communities for states and tribal nations who are administrating SSBCI, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we have a conversation tomorrow with the Treasury Working Group of states on debt. And then next week, we have a conversation with the Treasury Working Group on equity, right? So again, trying to make sure that folks are getting on board and having sort of the visibility that they need to move this work forward, right? And so if we go to the next slide here, this is just our vision, right? When we think about the Knowledge Network, of course, starting small, thinking big, and of course, always really thinking about this opportunity to grow here. And so starting with this sort of core group that we've named, what we really want to make sure that we're doing is that building a vision that will be a Knowledge Network will be the go-to resource for all stakeholders really working on SSBCI, right, across the country and potentially in Madrid as well, right? And through this collaborative network, what we're really trying to do is just break down any existing silos across these groups, really truly, and just really remove those barriers that might hinder access to funding, technical assistance, and other critical resources. Again, our real focus here is on supporting steady small businesses, right? So Brian just gave that definition, and of course, we are also really, really intentional about supporting sort of communities of color in this space as well. So I think that's something that's very, very important that we want to name. I'll say that another piece that I'd love to highlight here is that, I've mentioned a couple of times that we are having conversations with Treasury, but again, we're working very, very closely with them. I think the platform in particular is something that Treasury is very excited about in terms of surfacing different issues, surfacing different challenges, and actually having visibility in some of these pieces to really think about what are some of the material changes that they might be able to make, right? And how these inputs support them to do some of those pieces. Right. So that's our vision here. And I guess the next slide really is just talking about how we're going to get some of this done. Right. And, when we think about our role, we're thinking about as a resource and a facilitator, right? So we want to share tools, we want to share resources, we want to make connections like we're making today. We want to think about what are the different products that people have, how do we make sure that people know about them, right? We want to think about bringing state administrators and tribal nations together. We want to just really be exchanging knowledge. And part of the way that we're going to do that, or a big part of the way that we're going to do that, is to really set up some infrastructure here. So my colleague Joelle is going to walk through the platform that we've sort of highlighted and started working with to really power the Knowledge Network, right? So that platform has the capabilities to support just hundreds and hundreds of folks on the platform. And so we want to share a little bit about that platform in a moment, but again, really, really important. There'll be a demo of that platform, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk about how best that platform might be able to serve you as you go along your work. I think another piece that's really important to highlight here is just elevation. So we really want to make sure that we're elevating the work that is being done across all the verticals. That includes challenges that folks are facing in terms of execution, right? And disbursement of SSBCI dollars. So I'll say that as an example here, over the last several months, we've been talking to a large group of states about the SSBCI administration so far. I know that the folks at MDF has also been talking to tribal nations around sort of how that work's been going. And part of what we're doing is surfacing different opportunities, surfacing different challenges that might be being faced by folks who are administrating SSBCI right now. And I say that because this idea of elevation is really, really important and critical for us. And so, there are several ways that we're thinking about doing that. Of course, one of them will be on the platform. We're also sort of putting together a report on what we've heard across CDFIs, what we've heard across state administrators, and we're going to share that with Treasury, right? So again, I think thinking about how do we access Treasury, right? That's part of the way we'll do that. We'll actually hear what what we hear from all the folks in the field, and actually we'll put together different sort of documentation and have different conversations with Treasury to really highlight and raise up those issues. So there'll be a report that will also be going to Treasury around what we've heard so far. So that's something that's very important. We also have a newsletter that is actually currently being circulated across IIE partners internally, and then in some instances being shared with funders, so that folks are really on top of what it is that they're sort of thinking about. I'll say that if there is an appetite for it, definitely welcome input for that newsletter across folks who are different stakeholders in this room. So again, we can have more and more information. We can build that knowledge base that we really have here. Advocacy is a big piece of this, right? And so as we discover things, right, this title here says discovery, when we see those existing gaps, those needs, those opportunities, right? I talked about the report that we're putting together, right? That lives at stat, and it will be static at a certain point. The idea here is to have that continual cycle, right? And so as we continue to collaborate on the platforms, we continue to hear about different tools that are working across different states, different nations. We want to make sure that we're sort of building that clearer picture of what those types of things are. I'll give a couple of examples here. Over the course of the conversations that we've had, we've certainly heard about the potential for innovative finance products, such as revenue-based finance, that might be really well suited to supporting sort of SETI-owned small businesses. And as part of what we're doing in terms of our conversations with Treasury, we are now looking to sort of have a roundtable that discusses innovative finance products, in particular revenue-based finance, and how that might be applicable to the SSBCI work. And so right now we're sort of slated to have that conversation towards the end of this month. And so again, these are the different types of things that we'll be doing. We'll be inviting different partners to participate in those types of conversations. I'll also say that, as part of the work we've been doing, a number of states have already started to reach out to us, right? And sort of talk about, hey, we are understanding that there are sort of capacity constraints, and there might be technology solutions that might help with the reporting requirements from Treasury. And, we're hearing some of that and hearing folks who are coming up with solutions. And in our role as the Knowledge Network, we'll be surfacing those different pieces that come up to all the funders that we have access to. Again, not to promise that there'll be dollars flowing as a result of it, but to make sure that folks know, and if there are opportunities to support that type of work, that's certainly something that we want to make sure that we are engaging in, right? And so, I'll close here and just hoping that, this is really the beginning of a sort of deep and meaningful partnership across parties. Again, we want to make sure that folks are going to get onboarded to the platform. We'll do the demo in a moment. But again, we're just really hoping to foster some transformational change across this ecosystem, and in particular to really impact sort of SETI small business owners across the country who are engaged in this work. So I'll pause there for a moment before we get to the demo and just check in, how's all that landing for folks, and what questions, if any, do you have? Maybe let's transition over to the demo, and then we'll go into some breakouts and have a bit more of a discussion here.
Oh, Mark, if you want to bring that site up real quick, I will speak to the site, and then we will hop over to the platform. So I am very excited to walk you through briefly the Knowledge Network platform, which is called the IIE Hub. Key platform features, again, will be engagement and networking, live time via forums, knowledge sharing and learning, and then events and community engagement. So as OC mentioned a few times, we will be sending you all instructions on signing up for the platform following today's session. But for now, we will do a walkthrough of what you might see in different landing pages of the platform. So Mark, I will go ahead and take over screen share now. Hopefully. Okay. So welcome to the IIE Hub. This is a live website. So if you were to visit iiehub.org after this call, you will be taken to the public-facing landing page for our Knowledge Network community. Again, you will be sent sign-up instructions after this session, but if you were to land here on the homepage, immediately you could sign in via the hero button right here. Also available on the homepage to the public is a statement about who we are as IIE, the goal of the IIE Hub, and then a little bit more about the initiative. You can download the overview packet right here off the landing page, learn about our initiative lead, Hyphen, as well as the different verticals are all listed here. And then, of course, we already heard from Brian and Nowak, but a little bit more about Nowak, their community of practice, and then coming soon, more information about our state forum. I am going to actually now jump into what you will see as a member. So once you are on the platform, you will come to this member view homepage, which looks a little bit like we think a social media feed intentionally. So Higher Logic designed it this way so that you should all feel comfortable looking at your home feed. Your home feed will be completely customized based on the forum communities that you are added into. Everyone on this call will be added into the IIE Knowledge Network community. So that's our large group community, and then you'll be assigned based on your different vertical as well for different communities. Right here at the top, following this call, you can download this Knowledge Network Session 1 packet, which includes this deck that we've been walking through. Scrolling down on the left, you will see your profile. We are going to encourage you all to set up your profile as soon as possible. It's quick, couple minute exercise where you can add a photo, your title, and your company. And then what it'll do over here is it just sort of starts to rank how active you are on the platform. So I have 18 contributions because almost everything on here so far is things I have added, and it'll assign you points based on that. It's just a little fun metric to see who is engaged. Here on the left also are the communities that I am a part of. So as a super admin, I have access to all of the communities, but again, you will only see the ones that you are in. Your main feed will populate just based on updates, what's happening in your different forums, whether it be a new library document has been added, a new discussion thread has been created, just so you can keep track of the discussions that are most important to you. We have something from Mark here who posted in the Jumpstart vertical. The other really cool thing about this Higher Logic platform is we can actually set a newsletter cadence from the Higher Logic platform as well. So right now, our intention is that all users will receive a weekly email that will give you a digest of what you've missed on the IIE Hub in the last week. You can also engage directly with any of the content from that emailed newsletter. Over here on the right-hand side, we haven't added any quick links, but if there's anything in particular we're hoping you pay close attention to, such as a new resource, we would add it here. Upcoming events, this will populate if you have relevant upcoming events within your different forum communities. So right now you see Knowledge Network Session 1. We have a test event created for the Jumpstart onboarding community. Blog posts, again, not sure what will be utilized here. And then in terms of users already on the platform, it's just starting to rank how active you've been. So all very cool stuff. I am going to hop into the Knowledge Network community now, so you can see what that looks like. So all of the community forums are set up in the same layout right now. So this is the Knowledge Network one that you all will have access to. On the homepage, you'll see the latest discussions. We are actually going to move into a breakout in a little bit where we talk through these specific questions. So if you want to revisit those after this call, you'll be able to comment on the different discussion threads via the Knowledge Network community. So we're going to click into one just so you can see what it looks like. So this thread says, how can the SSBCI focus community, the IIE Hub, work for you? So you can see that I posted this 6 hours ago. I left a comment, what do you hope to gain or achieve from participating in an SSBCI focused online community? And then as a user, you can comment directly on that. It's still showing that I removed my test comment, but usually there's a comment box here that shows up so that you can, reply. You would hit reply and immediately a comment box will show up if you want to engage in that discussion. You can also navigate the different forum community here. So discussions, again, you can see them separately. You can post a new discussion using this button over here to the right, post a new message where you can start a discussion thread. We have all of our forums within the community set to self-moderation. So we'll probably set some basic rules for you all to follow, but we're entrusting you to self-moderate. But just know that there are a few of us on super admin status that will keep an eye on everything as well. Over here is our library repository. There are several, sometimes we've noticed Higher Logic takes a minute to update this count, but there's actually at least 4 documents in our library right now. So right here is our IIE overview packet. You have the deck that we've been walking through today, our agenda for today, and then a latest version of the IIE overview presentation that Hyphen has sent over. So all of those you can view at the top here, or you can also filter by folder. So IIE overview documents are listed here, Knowledge Network overview documents here. Once we add templates and meeting notes, those would appear here. So again, everything I'm previewing on this IIE Knowledge Network forum will be laid out similarly, I cannot say that, you catch my drift, will be laid out in a similar way in your respective vertical forums as well. So nothing should look different. Lastly, events, I'm just popping over here because I know this is populated. IIE Knowledge Network Session 1, I did list this one in here. I know we're all sitting in it right now, but if for some reason you did not have the registration information, you could access that here or download it directly to your calendar from our IIE Hub. Finally, I'm just going to pop over to my profile just to encourage you all to, again, fill it out. It is rather easy. So you can access your profile by clicking, it'll just be a circle with your initials before you put in a photo. But you will put in a photo your organization, location, I'm in Chicago, email, and then anything else you'd like to populate. We do recommend if you can link your LinkedIn, that would be helpful for everybody who you're interacting with. You can create a short bio, list any education, job history. It also gives you the opportunity to list professional associations, honors, and awards. So that was quite a lot in 10 minutes, but happy to take any questions. Otherwise, as we said, we will be sending along login instructions to let you all kind of have the keys to this platform and start communicating.
So this is Janine, Founders First. So
Yep.
Who all is privy to this platform? I mean, we're obviously partnering with some of the supplier councils. Are they appropriate audience to also invite to? Okay.
Absolutely. So everybody on this call, and then anyone within your specific vertical space that you want to engage in the conversation, they would all be appropriate to add to this platform. So we will defer to our different vertical leads on who should be invited. And there's two ways we can do this. We can do kind of a bulk upload on the back end, on the admin side, so that your invitees receive the login credentials all at the same time. Or if you sort of have a one-off person, you're like, oh, we'd love to add you. There's a different link we can send you where they can sort of create their own account, and then we'll just make sure they're assigned to your correct forum on the back end. Great question. Thank you.
Awesome. And as an example, right, the Jumpstart team have invited several partners. And so today, some of those partners will actually be onboarding onto the platform with Mark in the breakout room. So again, when folks are feeling ready, we're definitely here to support the effort. All right. Awesome. So we were going to do a quick poll, but I'm watching the time. And so maybe we won't do a poll, but we'll just go straight into our breakout rooms. We'll just be in there for about 10 minutes. And maybe if we get the the slides back up. There's just a couple of questions that we want to make sure that we're addressing as we sort of think about the platform overall, right? And so you probably have 10 minutes in your breakout rooms. Next one, I believe. All right. So we're just going to have about 10 minutes in your breakout rooms. And, we've shared a lot about the Knowledge Network. We've shared a lot about the platform, which folks will get access to. But we just want to think about these just 4 questions, right? So, what do you hope to gain from this type of community? What types of documents, tools, resources would you most like to see in your library, as an example? What will support a thriving and engaged community? I think that's really, really important for us to really think about as we sort of administer this community. And also, conversely, what will get in the way of a thriving community? Again, really want to make sure that we are really paying attention and supporting the effort here. So 2:12 right now. We'll have about 8 minutes in those breakouts, and then we'll come back. When we come back, we'll debrief a little bit, and then we will certainly open up the rooms for the vertical deep dive conversations, right? So got about 45 minutes to go. And so, again, if folks need to use a bathroom, take a break, grab some water, please do that as we go along. We'll just be in these breakout rooms for about 8 minutes, and we'll come back, debrief, and then finish off with next steps and going into our vertical communities. All right. I believe that we are back to full complement in the main room. So, before we just talk about the next steps and then send you into the final breakout rooms where you'll be having deeper discussions with your verticals, maybe just want to hear from a couple of folks, right? So what were some of those conversations like? And maybe what are the key things that stood out to you, maybe in particular around, what will support a thriving community, or the types of documents or discussions that you'd like to have in there. So maybe just hear from a couple of folks. Whoever you nominated from your group, it's your time. Maybe you didn't nominate anyone, so maybe someone has to step up in any case. But we'd just love to hear a couple of takeaways as we move through this.
Sorry, Mark, to put you on the spot. I thought we ended on a couple of good questions that you had. I apologize for picking on you, but I thought they were good questions, and potential just food for thought in terms of how we might experiment a little bit with this network. Would you mind sharing those?
Sure. No, appreciate it. And we sort of talking a little bit about sort of who are the right folks to sort of be on there. I'm right. Like what's the lens or the screen to make sure it's the right people with the right sort of focus, but at the same time, a couple of things we sort of talked through briefly, in sort of accessing that information. Like, I'd be very interested in sort of being able to set up push notifications for different channels depending on what's posted, right? So that I know what's happening in real time, especially as we're thinking about like reporting that's coming from Treasury for the states, the reporting from the states to Treasury, like when that's published. Obviously, a lot of the different states, I know California is going to be releasing its RFP for some of the TA stuff coming soon. So like things like that would be, I think, really valuable, as well as getting a good sense of who are the right folks that should be on this, right? Which we have vast networks of folks in a lot of these states. Like, which city is it? Everyone sort of that's enrolled in SSBCI at some level. What would that look like? So, I'll stop there. But I think it has a ton of potential, and I think it really depends on who's using it and who's enrolled in it.
Awesome, appreciate that, Mark. And Felicia, appreciate you for putting Mark on the spot because I wasn't going to do it. So I appreciate
Sorry,
that.
Mark, you can do it to me on another call. But just one more quick point that Heidi raised was, I think this is a little bit of a unique community because, there are spaces that exist for, CDFIs that we are bringing together folks across the high growth, vertical, supplier, Main Street, tribal. So I think, just getting a sense of like who's even at the table and how, kind of, because it is sort of a pretty diffuse and could be a potentially vast network. So just making sure that there's some level of transparency around sort of who's at the table and we can figure out communication loops going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Felicia. I'll take maybe two more if they're there.
I'm happy to jump in from our breakout group. So we talked about that SSBCI is really a complicated program, right? You have all this federal funding flowing to states, and each states are providing different have different flavors of the work in their states. And so we talked about creating additional shared resources that could be available on the platform about SSBCI in IIE states, and really building from Brian's really fantastic presentation earlier today. I'm really tailored to the right stakeholder audience. So, capital providers, I'm sure would love to hear more about the status of the programs in the states, how to apply, contacts, and just opportunities for engagement with states directly. I'm sure it would be of relevance. Kevin earlier today, mentioned on the TA side as well. That's another opportunity for maybe a helpful resource about the status of TA dollars in these states. Application links, if any, are available and currently open. Contacts. So really helping make SSBCI a lot more digestible and kind of easier for the relevant stakeholder audiences that we're all engaging.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zach. Appreciate that. Maybe one more. Maybe we've got time for it. One more. If you're there, but if you're not, that's okay. All right. Awesome. So what? Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it. I just put our notes in the chat, OC.
Awesome.
So it was all, I think, is kind of related to what was shared about just making sure state updates are shared, and we're seeing like state engagement on there, and what that could look like, and any kind of sensitivity to information that's being shared on the platform. I think there was some questions about making sure we onboard other participants that may not be on this call, and then as well as within an organization having the right team member be part of the forums and engagement, which may not be someone who's on this call. Also just making sure best practices are shared, and that could be super helpful, and especially, for example, for lenders who may be onboarding different states and operationalizing, like how are they going about things. So having a forum to discuss those types of things would be very helpful.
I think that sounds really great. And, I'll share a little bit about the next steps in a moment. And so really just hearing from different folks here, useful things, right? So technical assistance updates, right? Application links, things like that. Guidance for who should be involved in this, right? To Rian's point, also who from organizations even represented in this space should be on there, right? And can we have the right onboarding guides to support folks, right? I heard maybe a little bit from Zach about opportunities to engage with states, right? So think about what that might look like. And I heard, I think from Mark, some of those push notifications, right? So if there's an announcement, what does that look like? And certainly the platform has the functionality for that as well, whether that's attached to your email or attached to the platform itself. So again, I think we can certainly sort of think about how to accommodate some of those different pieces. So I'll wrap us up here just in terms of the general room. We have one more stand to take, which will be along vertical lines. But if we get the slides back up, I'll just share what the next steps are just from the Knowledge Network before you have the deeper dive conversations with your specific groups. So next week, we will be sending out a survey to everyone in this group. I think we've already received some feedback, but that survey will also be structuring in some of the conversations that we've had, some of those open questions, so we can get support in terms of how to build out the community for you to best support you in the best way. So we'll be sharing that survey. That survey will also include an opt-in, right, if you want to think about contributing to the newsletter, to the IIE newsletter, and how that might be able to support you. So again, just look out for that. Week of the 13th, folks will receive the invite to join the Knowledge Network platform, including just a how-to guide on some of the key functionalities and how to log in, sign up, post on discussions, upload documents, and those types of pieces as well. And for us, in terms of myself, Joel, and Mark, will always be on hand to support, platform administration. We'll be adding one other person to the team as well in the next couple of weeks to make sure that we can really support it in fullness. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to myself, Joel, or Mark. Our contact details will be included up in our follow-up from this conversation as well. And so that's what we have in terms of the main room here. Stephen, thanks for putting those Tribal Nation takeaways in. We'll definitely capture those pieces as well. And so now we're just going to go into our vertical breakouts. I think you were just in there in a bit, but I think the Main Street folks, we split you into several pieces because there are several of you. So everyone will be conjoined now now. And then we'll be going into our high growth verticals. We'll be going into our Main Street vertical, supplier, as well as tribal nations. And you'll be able to sort of discuss the pieces that you have lined up for those different teams, right? So we've got about 27 minutes left. We won't be coming back to the main room. So once you're done in your breakout room, you can feel free to log off from there. And again, expecting the follow-up from us as we move forward with the work and implementing the platform. So again, just really want to appreciate everyone's time today, knowing that the time is not yet done. Yeah, again, just appreciating folks today. And we'll be opening those breakout rooms. And again, from there, feel free to exit after that.